back again. So anyway, Piro's video was on, response to Hoffaday was this ambiguous field rubbish where Piro basically says empty space isn't empty space, it's space. So space doesn't mean space, it means there's space for space in the space. The space is full of space for spacey things in the space, and that kind of, but that's already sort of a given, isn't it, from these, this phantasmagorical physics of bent space-time. You already have a fake dimension full of enough energy to shove galaxies into each other, so why are you worried about how empty space is when you have space-time where, all kinds of shit can happen? Right now, space-time is theoretically somehow driving me into the Earth. The space-time is doing it. It's providing the energy to push me into the Earth. So no energy required. I don't have to supply any. The Earth doesn't have to supply any space-time. And, but yeah, it doesn't really convert, to the nanoscale. All of a sudden your fabric starts to break down, but you have to start making it out of something. Because you have to explain why the photons aren't affected by it. Except when they're getting lensed by the galaxies 5 billion light years away. Then they're affected, but they're not affected in any kind of local circumstance. Well, anyway, so they can't really do anything with it. So they're stuck with magnets, and they're still saying, well, where's the energy come from? Where's the energy come from? Well, we'll just make up some sort of virtual thing. Some sort of magical thing. It's the magic of magnets. That's where the energy comes from. And well, look, this all just comes down to a dead ether, right? So now Piro in 2 videos he's brought up Michelson-Morley, which is this silly little let's run stuff in mirrors back and forth, and we'll see if the light gets slowed down by the ether. I mean, the presumption that the ether would be an impediment to the light in the first place is plainly silly. I mean, it really doesn't prove the non-existence of something by just say, well, light goes through it. I mean, light goes through a lot of things. So, yeah. But anyway. But clearly, if you make the ether an active ether, well, then the ether becomes space-time. Becomes something capable of producing energy. And so then you're done with this nonsense, and now you have an active ether that you can use the same energy to create magnetism. So, problem solved. But instead of thinking about that and making that into something, these idiots, these obnoxious assholes, instead of being part of the construction of a better idea, they just naysay and say, no, we like our bent space-time that's totally useless in explaining anything but galaxies crashing into each other. Or, yeah, keeping us on the ground. Because you just don't, and it's all right here, the velocity thing, the field thing. Anyway, so I don't know what Hofladay's objection to fields, I just don't really understand, because, he can't even get, when I say there's a field of arrows, you can't even get that as a field, so I don't know what his problem is. I mean, if I said it's a field of ball bearings that all moving the speed of light, I don't know, what do I have to do to explain to you it's a field, and that it exists? It's real, it's not synthetic, it's not just some sort of fake designation. It's a real designation created by a real previous circumstance that was really previous. Anyway, nothing arbitrary about it. I mean, nothing untraceable to a cause and effect. Chain of who knows how far back it goes. Who really cares? Because we know what it's doing. We know the game of checkers. We just don't need to know who made the board. Really don't. I don't think. It's not a very... It doesn't tell you much. You're stuck playing checkers. That's just a fact. I mean, blaming it on something. Oh, fuck, that made the checkerboard. Well, who cares? You're stuck playing checkers. You're not going to be able to go play anything else. So what's the difference? Who made the damn game? Things that hang people are just so silly. Anyway, in my opinion. So anyway, we was talking a little bit about velocity, and he was doing some of that, with the idea that your velocity degrades the structure of matter. So the more faster you're going, the less structure your matter has because it's spending more time going one way. So the little bits inside of you are always moving up, down, left, right, forward, back, doing that all the time. And more of them are moving in the forward direction. But the interesting thing is the fact that that like a gyroscope, your directionality can only really wants to exist in one dimension. If it has velocity in two directions, it's going to constantly try to convert that into one direction. So your gyroscope keeps orienting to one velocity. It doesn't want to have, it won't accept having two velocities. It only accepts having one velocity in one dimension. And so it keeps reorienting your gyroscope to that direction, which is an interesting thing when it comes to this parabola. So Pirro used parabola in both videos 17 times. There's no if I throw a baseball straight up, it comes straight down. There's no parabola, jackass. And you can invent one by saying I'm moving on the surface of the Earth, but I just say let's go to a place where there's no spin to the moon. So let's go find a moon around Saturn that doesn't have a spin, and then I'll throw the baseball up and the baseball falls straight down. I mean, that's what it's going to do. And certainly there's no parabola. If I throw the baseball down, we know it's not parabolating. So fuck this parabola bullshit. It has nothing to do with reality. It just has to do with that gyroscope reorienting, and once it's reoriented, then it's just going to convert it all the way down to a straight line, okay? It's not going to do a parabola. It's going to do a I'm going down, fucker. But it has to get rid of that velocity first. So the Earth is in this situation where there's two competing forces. There's the velocity of the Earth in a direction away, and then there's the pull of the Sun, which is a velocity and acceleration towards the Sun. And the Earth's velocity is the winner. It keeps eating the Sun's contribution. So the Sun has to keep reintroducing the same acceleration over and over and over again, because it can never get the Earth any closer, because the Earth, what can, because the elliptical orbit, that's a whole different subject. And that's when the velocity does change, obviously. Speeds up, the Earth does. Alright, so first I'll just get to the simple drawing of the idea of the rectangle, and the idea that your tangents get weaker, and certain things when you have velocity. And so this is probably just to people who have been following along with that conversation. But anyway, I drew a diagram the other day that was just a little bit funky, in the sense that I made the implication that this is what the orbit changes into, that somehow this direction gets less. And this direction doesn't, this is a thing moving this way. So it has more arrows going this way, less arrows going this way, and the tangents are getting compressed. But the real key is that the first thing that goes is all of this. All of this is the exhaust of whatever you shot to gain your acceleration. So if there's that equal but opposite reaction. So the impact, if you were hit by a hammer, there'd be an opposite reaction into the hammer, which would be the releasing of all of these arrows. So you basically just release all of the arrows inside of you. So all the arrows inside of me, they're going forward. Going backward. If I was to be accelerated, I would basically be giving all of those away. So if I had a little jet engine tied to the back of me, it would shoot a bunch of stuff going backward. I'd be giving away all those arrows, and I'd have a net imbalance of a lot of positive arrows and no arrows going backwards, so to speak. But what I would be doing is moving into the future, moving forward, and there was a bunch of arrows going this way as you move forward. I got a whole bunch of them that are coming at me. And all they're doing, so the ones out here coming at me faster now, they just replaced the ones I gave away. I don't need the ones I gave away anymore, because I am getting a whole bunch of new ones from the environment as I have velocity into it. So as I move into the environment, I just use these arrows perpetually. I just keep letting them go straight through me, and I keep using them to maintain my rectangle. So my rectangle gets maintained through the extra arrows. These are all extras coming from the environment. So the environment's going to feed me. As I have velocity this way, the environment's going to feed me extra arrows, and they're just going to fill this void here constantly. Just keep replacing this part of the triangle, this part of the rectangle. So now it maintains this illusion, okay, of a rectangle. So I have the balance back. but I still maintain this velocity. So technically I still have more arrows going this way. It's just they're not my arrows. I'm just riding on these fake ones going by me all the time. So this is, I mean, it's hard to say this is a legitimate arrow and this is an illegitimate arrow, but obviously these are ones I get rid of. These are permanent. So there's a difference between the ones that are still owned by me permanently and the ones that just go through me and are gone. Temporary ones. So that's the first thing that changes with velocity, is you expel the backward arrows as permanent arrows, and then you start killing the tangents. And so your rectangle, as you go faster and faster, what happens is your rectangle gets smaller and thinner, and you turn into spaghetti. Okay, as you go faster and faster, you're literally spaghetti-rising. You're losing more and more of your perpendicular dimensions. So anyway, I was thinking about this when it comes to lift on an airplane, and that's sort of an interesting subject. I don't want to get too deep into it because the technicalities are incredible. It comes to when you really start analyzing this. But there's this idea that the real game is just that which way is the damn thing pointed. You know what I mean? So I have a wheel here and I have a wheel here, and fuck wings and all this kind of crap. I have a thing pointed, go this way, please. And I'm trying to get it to go that way, but it just goes this way. Right? Because the Earth's gravity is pushing it down. So the real game is we know the Earth's gravity, okay, is doing this 22 miles per hour. So that's the force down. I mean, it's 10 meters per second, but it's really 22 miles an hour per second. Okay, that's what, 22 miles an hour per second. But it is that way, though. I mean, it's just you're just going 22 miles an hour is the true acceleration in a term I can understand better. So that's why I like miles per hour, because it goes with this, I'm going to be traveling 200 miles an hour on the ground, and I'm going to try to explain how what's really happening is it's like the baseball. I throw a baseball at a pitch. It's going to have to keep going arcing until it finally gets to a point where it's going to really start being affected by gravity. So the first part of the gravity doesn't affect, isn't really gaining anything. It's just taking away what you put on it. And so when the plane is starting to take off, it's going much too slow. It's like so the thing I was thinking about was when I was a kid, I used to run. I loved running. And I'd run up a hill, and then you jump off the hill, and you get that little air time. I love that shit. And sometimes you get a little too much air time, because you're jumping off a 10-foot hill, and it's it's a little rough, the landing sometimes. But I'd have dreams like that too, where I was always flying into my dreams. And I'd always start to fly the same way. I'd run, and then as I'm running, I would just jump like Superman or something, and you're flying, and then I'd get way too high, and then I'd somehow forget how to fly, and I'm way up there, and I just, it was never, the landings were never pretty. But anyway, I was just thinking about that, and that's sort of what's happening here, is that you can really visualize, you can kind of think that if I can run fast enough, and then I jump, I'll be able to maintain it. And if I had a little motor that could keep me going once I do jump, it'd be really easy to just keep going. Right? Even without wings. You can just sort of understand that, once you have enough speed, and you have the right angle, pitch, nothing can stop you as long as you have something that keeps giving you speed. I mean, if you lose speed, you're going to fall. But it's really about your speed. And that's sort of that's all it's about with these airplanes in a way. Is they just have to get going fast enough this way, okay, in this direction, and then they have this, they're pitched just enough, they have enough of a pitch to say, look, I really want to go up. Okay, so they're not like a bicycle just going straight and it's not trying to go up. Planes are pitched a little bit. They have the little front wheels holding the front end up a little higher. So, its nose is a little higher than its tail. So it's saying, look, I want to go up. All right, so it's saying, I want to go up. And it's really about how much speed do I have to get before I overcome this 22 miles an hour per second, that's coming down on me. So then all you got to do is sort of do this calculation of figuring out, okay, so at what speed, okay, so now I have to think about how I wanted to say this. you can't just go 22 miles an hour sideways and expect to be able to change that. So it's really about this pitch. Okay, so the more you can pitch this thing, okay, probably the easier it's going to be. But see, that's where air just ends up, the air resistance is going to end up ruining it. So if you took away the air resistance and just had, you know, just something pointed in a direction. Say if I pitch it too high, the air is going to catch it and it's just going to flip it over. So it's not going to, it's going to fail to take off because the air is going to push it over before it gets enough speed to overcome the gravity. But really all you're doing is saying, well, what's this, what percentage is this pitch? And then you say, well, okay, then that percentage, say it's a 10% or 10 degrees. At what point is 10 degrees of my speed on the ground? So say if I get my speed on the ground to say 100 and, let's say 200, let's say 150 miles an hour. I don't know how fast planes take off, like 180, let's say 180 miles an hour. Well, if I get to 180 miles an hour, right, and say this number is 10%, that would be 18 miles per hour. That could go to this direction. You know what I mean? It's going in the up direction. So it's really this direction versus this direction. You know, so technically you could say that, yeah, 150 is working this way and 20 is working this way. And as soon as I get that 20 working this way, you know, somewhere in this dimension. So these are two different, so even though it doesn't look like they're two different dimensions, it's really a component in two different directions, right? So as soon as I do some pitchy thing like this, right, it doesn't take much of a pitchy thing. This is one dimension, this is in the other dimension, right? This is a component in the X, and this is the component in the Y. And so this, say the Y dimension went this way to this pitch, right? This is Y, and this is X up here. So, you know, I'm right on the edge. When I'm going this way, I'm on the edge of the Y dimension. I can go this way and still be in the Y dimension, but if I go anywhere up here, I'm in the X dimension. If you really get what I'm saying, it's the three dimensions, X, Y, Z. And so there's a component of this pitch that puts me in the X direction. So a component of this speed is technically going to be in the X direction, which you can now draw as a straight line up. So there'll be a certain percentage that's actually going up, even though it looks like it's all lateral. There's really a component of it that's vertical. So it looks like it's all horizontal velocity, but technically, because of my angle, a portion of it is actually velocity in the up direction. And so all I'm looking for is that 22 miles per hour, right, which is 18, is pretty damn close, right? So we're pretty close to the mark at 180 miles per hour. We're pretty close to getting to this 22 miles per hour I need to overcome gravity. So gravity is a neutral then. And if then I can increase, so all I have to do then is once I get off the ground just a little, I can start increasing that pitch, and then I need less and less. The more I increase the pitch, because now I want the wind to try to knock me over. Once I'm off the ground, getting knocked over by the wind is almost to my advantage. Because it's going to increase my pitch. And so now all my velocity will be more of my velocity, let's say a higher percentage. As my pitch increases, as I'm taking off, then more, less and less of my velocity is getting wasted on doing this, and more of my velocity is overcoming gravity. So it really, you know, the lift on the wing shit and all that crap is all really interesting, but it really isn't the game. That's why I like the space shuttle. It's not really a good example just because it doesn't have the aerodynamics to take off. You know, it's only really using its wings to create friction when it's falling. So it's a really bad example of flight. So I shouldn't even bring it up. Okay, but rockets are sort of the example, right? I mean, they're like submarines, right? They have tiny little fins that are really good for just doing little turns, but they have nothing to do with the lift of the rocket. The rocket's all about the exhaust and the angle of its trajectory, you know, shooting at the right angle. And that's it. You know, and having enough velocity by the time you reach the end of your track to maintain to overcome, to stay ahead of gravity. If gravity beats you, it'll beat you completely. See, that's the thing. One of these directional vectors is going to win, the up or the vertical, and whenever one wins, it's going to win. And the other one will get less and less because this one's going to win. Because your gyroscope is always going to keep turning to that new direction. And so once you overcome gravity, you've overcome it. You're going to keep overcoming it as long as you have an exhaust. And as soon as you run out of power or something, then gravity is going to go back to winning because your velocity is going to drop off to nothing. And with no velocity, you can't possibly overcome gravity if you don't have a velocity. Get that? Yes. And it doesn't matter what dimension your velocity is in. If you don't have any, you can't overcome gravity with 0 miles per hour of velocity. So anyway, but it explains stalling and all of that stuff is in there, and it's just really, I just found it curious, that you just keep finding new little bits in this thing that, things I never thought of, and I just never thought about the idea that movement has this dimensional aspect to it, and that there's nothing about the mechanics that really will let you move 2 ways at once. It really wants to convert you into one direction, and that there is kind of a dimensional gyroscope that's always going to move you to one dimension and then try to eat the other dimension's velocity and try to push them 2 into 1. And if they're not going to be fitted into one of them is going to win. And so in the case of the Earth going around the Sun, the Earth's velocity wins. And in the case of an airplane, the pitch wins eventually. As long as you get enough ground speed, that pitch will say, I'm going this way. That little nudge into the y dimension from the x dimension from the y dimension is going to get you there. The vertical dimension versus the horizontal versus the forward back, the 3 dimensions. Very interesting, I think. It's just so, like I said, this is going to be like an endless. I mean, there's going to be a point. Frankly, I just want to get this ball rolling and then let other eggheads play with it. But it's kind of fun because the more you play with it, the more you find. It's like an Easter egg hunt or something. It's kind of fun, and it's just kind of funny that all these assholes are missing out on this. I mean, they could be doing these little discoveries and and playing along and having some fun finding the Easter eggs that you can find with this new theory, and instead they're just going to be obnoxious pricks. Pitiful. So I get to have all the fun, right? So that's okay. Yeah. I'm okay with that. So anyway, enough of a video. A little bit shorter. Thank you. Yes, I know. Awful lot of videos. But yeah, it's just really everything I touch, every kind of concept I touch, it just more stuff pops into your head about how this stuff is all connected. I mean, it's just amazing. Like I said, I'm just barely thought about the electricity thing, and the fact that it's the wires become a polarized filter that creates another field in another tangential or perpendicular direction. That's all about this perpendicular thing. That one force goes into the perpendicular dimension, and that's where the force is translated back to the other dimension. And it's just so obvious, and it's just so interesting. So, all right. Till next time. Such.